A mom took her kids to Dairy Queen and allowed each of them to approach the counter and place the order for their particular item. And after waiting for about 5 minutes, the young lady who took their order, probably about 17 years old, handed each of the children the item that they ordered. But the mom noticed that when the children received their item, that none of them made contact or eye contact with the young lady. When they placed their order, none of them said please, and none of them said thank you to the young lady or even to mom. And so as the children received their items, they each proceeded to just walk out the door of the Dairy Queen as the mom just stood there and watched. So as each of the children walked out the door with the item that mom had purchased for them, mom followed them out and then slowly gathered up each of the children's ice cream and deposited each item into the nearby trash can. Of course, the children were devastated that why would mom do this? But mom did this to teach them a lesson. And as they continued to protest, mom just stood there, and then the children realized that mom had something to say. And then mom proceeded to let them know that hopefully one day that they will have the opportunity to work in a job like this young lady. And hopefully one day that they will have customers that will come to them and be polite and say please and say thank you and appreciate them for the job that they have done. But she threw away their ice cream. She threw away their ice cream. I can't believe she threw away their ice cream. Pat Armstrong here with another edition of Increase, the lifestyle vlog for men and the women who love them. And I hope you, I don't know if enjoyed is the right word, the story that I just shared with you. It's actually a pretty sad story. You think about it. Beyond the fact that mom threw away their ice cream, it's a story that shows us, unfortunately, where we are in our society today. Our society is in really bad shape when it comes to socially. It's a sad thing that people do not teach children the basics of just social activity, of being polite to one another, of being kind to one another, of treating each other with respect. And so today what I'd like to do is just share with you 3 things that can help each one of us to increase our social game. I'll tell you this, if we need any type of social training, it is today. In the United States of America, it just seems like socially we are in bad shape. So again, I'd like to just give you 3 things that will help you in your social game. Number 1 is be kind. I don't know how many of you are like me, but I still have VHS tapes. And if you remember back in the 1980s and in the early 90s when places like Blockbuster and Family Video and video places like that were still around, where you could rent VHS tapes. On the sticker of a lot of those VHS tapes, there would be a sticker on there that would tell you, please be kind and rewind. A lot of people would return the videotapes without rewinding them back to the beginning. And we think about that, and this is kind of funny, it's kind of silly that they would do something like that. But if you ever had to rewind one of those things, it took a little while. But again, not that big of a deal. But that was just one of those things where we'd ask just to be kind. That's probably one of the biggest things that we need socially today, is just to be kind one to another. The Bible even tells us that we should be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven us. And I'll tell you, we live in a mean world and a selfish world, and people are not kind to each other. I know all of you have heard this before. If you can't say something kind or you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. But now we live in the land of free speech, and believe me, I'm all about free speech. But sometimes we need to think before we open our mouth. And many times it's amazing what people say, and then they follow it up with something like, well, you know, that's just me, and if you don't like it, well, I just can't help it. And or they'll do certain things. And you know, the number one thing that you can do in your social game is be kind. Be nice. Number two, the second thing that we need to do to up our social game, be respectful. It's sad that in our world today, we have gotten away from saying things like please and saying things like thank you. To address someone with a yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. It's funny that, well, again, we use that phrase a lot. It's not funny, it's actually sad that I can address someone, a child, and I would address a child the same way I would address an adult when asked a question. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am. And then that child turn around and look at their parents and say, I'm not a sir, or I'm not a ma'am. Or I'd have ladies walk into the store and I would say, how are you ladies today? And the little girl look up at her mom and say, I'm not a lady. But they don't know how to be respectful to each other today. I'll tell you, they'll call each other everything under the sun, but not sir, not ma'am, and not say please, and not say thank you. You know, it's never too early and also never too late to learn how to be respectful. The number three thing that we can do to increase and improve our social game is to love each other. You know, one of the things that everybody wants to throw shade on God is by saying, well, God wouldn't do this because God is a God of love, and a God of love would not do something like that. But then we turn around and treat people like garbage. But we expect God to love everybody. I mean, God does love everybody. The Bible tells us that God is love. But he also says this, we will show each other who we are. We will show each other that we are Christians by our love for one another. And you know, the English language is they say one of the hardest languages to learn. And the reason why is in our language, we like to use the same word to describe different things. And one of those words is the word love. In the ancient Greek language, there was actually three words for love. The first one was the word eros, which is where we get our word erotic from. And that talks about physical love, a love between a man and a woman. Another form of love that was used in the ancient Greek language was the word phileo. And that's where we get our word Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. That was the type of love that, you know, a very close friendship. And then there was another word for love that was used in the Greek language, which is probably the most familiar that people are familiar with, but we don't use that often, and that's the love word agape. And what that love is, that's the type of love that we have for each other, expecting nothing in return. And that's the kind of love that we need to have for each other. If we want to improve our social game, if we want to increase our social game, we've got to improve on those three things. Remember, we've got to be kind to one another. We've got to be nice to each other. Number 2, we've got to be respectful to each other. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. Please. Thank you. And the most important, number 3, we've got to show love for each other. The kind of love that expects nothing in return. Why are these 3 things so important? Because ice cream is a very valuable commodity.